My name is Kaylin Fletcher. I am 34 years old. I live by myself in a small, quiet house that I bought on the east side of Cleveland, Ohio. I don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend. I work a lot, and I like my peaceful little life. I never expected that one Friday afternoon would turn everything upside down. That Friday afternoon, I was in the middle of a Zoom meeting for work. It was an important audit meeting, and I had to focus completely on the screen. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a ring alert. That is the sound the app makes when someone is at your front door. I quickly muted myself in the Zoom meeting and glanced at the screen. Then I froze. Standing on my front porch were my brother's 2 kids. Caius, who is 4 years old, and Alara, who is only 2. They were carrying small suitcases, and there was a diaper bag sitting next to them. But there were no adults. No car. No one else was around. Just the 2 tiny kids looking up at me. But before I continue, hit the subscribe button and tell me where are you watching this from, and what time of day is it? 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my sister, Zephra. It said, "Hey sis, we're taking a quick 3-day trip to Las Vegas with mom and dad. Thanks for watching the kids. Back Monday." I stared at the message, feeling my jaw tighten. I typed one word back. Okay. I hit send, put the phone down, and looked straight at those 2 little faces staring up at my door. Little did they know, 3 days later, when the whole family came back, they would walk into something that would change everything forever. I stepped out onto the porch, and my stomach sank. There were 2 little kids I hadn't seen in months. Caius, 4 years old, was clutching his baby sister, Alara, who was only 2. Next to them were 2 small rolling suitcases and a diaper bag. No car, no adult, nothing. I felt panic rising in my chest. I quickly scooped Alara into my arms and held Caius's hand as I pulled them inside before the neighbors could see. As soon as the door closed behind us, I opened the Ring app on my phone. The footage was crystal clear. My parents, Orrin and Maris Fletcher, had pulled up, dropped the kids in the bags, kissed them quickly, and then driven away without knocking. They had timed it perfectly in the middle of my Zoom call, so I couldn't answer the door fast enough to stop them. I sat the kids down on the living room rug. Alara immediately started crying for her mommy. Caius just looked around, confused, like he didn't know what was happening. I opened the fridge and realized I had almost nothing a toddler could eat. After searching, I found half a sleeve of Oreos and a carton of milk that was still good for a day. That became their dinner. I poured them some water in plastic cups because I didn't even own sippy cups. While they were nibbling on their small dinner, I stared at my phone again. Zephra's text glowed on the screen, and I felt like it was mocking me. I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep them here long term. My house had no crib, no high chair, no spare diapers, no children's medicine, nothing. I am 34, single, and the closest thing I own to a toy is a stress ball shaped like a baseball. I knew I had to call someone I could trust. I dialed Vesper Quinn, my best friend from college. She is now one of the smartest family lawyers in northern Ohio. She picked up on the second ring. "Kaylin, what's wrong? You never call on a Friday night," she said. I put her on speaker, lowered my voice, and told her everything. I told her about the porch drop-off, the text about Vegas, the Ring video, and the fact that I had nothing in my house for the kids. She went quiet for about 5 seconds. Then she spoke in the calm but scary voice she uses before she destroys someone in court. "Listen carefully," she said. "Don't buy anything. Don't set up a crib or a playpen. Don't post pictures. If you start acting like a caregiver, the court could decide you agreed to take care of them. We have until Monday morning to make sure that never happens." She told me to save every frame of the video, screenshot the text messages, and make a timeline of events. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Kaylin, abandoning minors on private property without consent is a felony in Ohio. They just handed you the perfect paper trail," she said. I looked over at Caius, who had chocolate smeared across his cheek, and Alara, who had fallen asleep with her head on my thigh. 2 innocent kids caught in the middle of my family's reckless game. Vesper kept talking, giving me instructions about deadlines, statutes, and emergency hearings. I took notes on the back of an envelope because I didn't want to wake Alara by reaching for a notebook. By the time we hung up, it was almost 9 p.m. The kids were exhausted. I carried them to the guest room, laid them on the queen-size bed, and surrounded them with pillows so they wouldn't roll off. I sat in the dark hallway outside the door, phone in hand, watching the Ring footage on loop. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last time I had bailed my family out 6 years ago when I co-signed on a house to save them from foreclosure. I never imagined they would use it as collateral to gamble away everything or dump their grandchildren on my doorstep like an unwanted package. Saturday morning came fast. I sat at my desk with a cold mug of coffee and opened the secure county property portal we use at work. As a senior forensic accountant, I have access to records most people never see. I typed in the address of the old family house on East 125th, the one my parents still lived in with Zephyra. The deed popped up immediately. 6 years ago, I had co-signed as a joint tenant with the right of survivorship so they could refinance and avoid foreclosure. I remembered that day clearly. I had flown in, signed at the title company, and flown out the same afternoon, thinking I was helping keep a roof over everyone's head. What I discovered next made my hands shake. After I left Ohio, they had taken out a home equity line of credit for $380,000. My signature was nowhere on the new loan documents. In Ohio, every joint owner must sign for a home loan to be valid. They had either forged the application or left me out entirely. This was textbook mortgage fraud. I pulled the credit report attached to the lien and felt the room tilt. The balance was maxed out, and payments had stopped 9 months earlier. A bright red final notice from the bank was scanned into the file. The judgment of foreclosure had been entered, and the sheriff's sale was scheduled in exactly 60 days. I forwarded everything to Vesper. She called me back within minutes. "Kaylin, this is a slam-dunk fraud case," she said. "The lender will eat this up because they're about to lose hundreds of thousands on a bad loan. We're filing an emergency motion Monday morning to remove your name from the title and freeze any further draws. I'm also drafting a temporary restraining order against your parents and Zephyra for financial abuse. Send me every screenshot you have." I spent the next 4 hours building the evidence package. I downloaded the full Ring video in 4K, exported the text thread with timestamps, pulled the deed history, the home equity line of credit origination file, and the foreclosure docket. I even found the original notary journal from 6 years ago, showing I had never appeared for the new loan. Every piece fit together like a perfect puzzle of betrayal. While the files were uploaded, I walked down the hall to check on the kids. Caius was coloring on printer paper with highlighters, and Alara was stacking coasters into a wobbly tower. They looked content for the moment, but I knew this calm wouldn't last. I had maybe 48 hours before my family realized I wasn't playing along this time. Vesper texted again around noon. "Motion is ready. Whatever you do, don't let them pressure you into keeping the kids longer. The longer they stay, the harder it is to prove abandonment." I stared at the foreclosure notice one last time. 60 days. That house was the only asset my parents had left, and they had gambled it away without ever telling me. All those years of sending money when they were short, all the times I covered overdraft fees or paid a light bill so the kids wouldn't sit in the dark, it had never been enough. I closed the laptop, and for the first time in 24 hours, I felt something stronger than panic. I felt clarity. Cold, steady clarity. They thought they could drop 2 children on my doorstep and disappear to Las Vegas like I was their personal safety net. They were about to learn exactly how expensive that mistake would be. Saturday afternoon, I made a call I never thought I'd have to make. I dialed the Ohio Child Protective Services hotline. I gave my name and address and told the intake worker exactly what happened. 2 minor children had been left on my porch without my consent, without car seats, and without any supplies. I stayed calm and stuck to the facts, and I emailed the Ring footage while still on the line. Less than 4 hours later, a white sedan pulled up outside. 2 caseworkers stepped out, Miss Celine, the investigator, and Mr. Theron, her supervisor. They introduced themselves politely, asked if they could come in, and immediately started taking photos of the living room, the kitchen cabinets, and the hallway closet. They noted the complete absence of diapers, formula, childproof locks, or even a proper bed for a toddler. When they saw the Ring video on my laptop, their expressions changed from professional to grim. Ms. Celine knelt down to Caius's level and asked gentle questions. He told her, "Grandma and Grandpa said Aunt Kaylin would take care of us for a few days." Alara just hugged a throw pillow and repeated "Mama" over and over. The workers exchanged a look I'd seen before in fraud investigations. The look that says, "This case just became priority 1. They explained the next steps clearly. Because the children had been abandoned, and I was refusing ongoing kinship placement due to lack of resources, the county would file an emergency dependency petition that night. A magistrate would have a special meeting called a shelter care hearing within 72 hours. This meeting was to decide who would take care of the kids for a short time while everything got sorted out. Until then, the children would go to a licensed emergency foster home, which is a safe place that could meet their needs right away. I asked if I could keep the kids until Monday, so they wouldn't have to move to a new place twice in a short time. Ms. Celine shook her head. She said, "The rules are very clear. If a relative does not want to take care of the kids officially, the children have to go to the foster home tonight. This rule actually protects you legally." She gave me a paper called Declination of Kinship Caregiver Status. That is a fancy way of saying, I don't want to take care of the kids officially. I signed it without thinking twice. While Mr. Theron finished some paperwork in his car, Ms. Celine packed the children's 2 small suitcases again. She let me write a quick note on a sticky note for the people who would take care of the kids next. I wrote down their favorite snacks and the stuffed dinosaur that Caius couldn't sleep without. When it was time to leave, Caius started crying and clung to my leg. I crouched down, hugged him tight, and promised I would see him very soon. Alara reached for me with both arms, and my heart felt like it broke in half, but I had to hand her over. The caseworkers put them in county car seats and drove away just as the street lights came on. I stood on the porch for a long time, even after the car's tail lights disappeared. I felt relief and guilt at the same time. Relief because I had done the hardest thing in my life. Guilt because 2 innocent kids were paying for the mistakes of the adults. Inside the house felt too quiet. I poured a glass of wine I didn't drink and opened my laptop again. The CPS intake report was already in the system. It said, Case Mtorn 2025 D44817, emergency removal authorized, shelter care hearing scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. Vesper had been copied on the email and texted immediately. Perfect. This locks in the abandonment charge. See you at the courthouse. I closed every blind, set the security alarm, and sat in the dark living room thinking about the day. In less than 24 hours, my family had managed to abandon children and commit mortgage fraud in the same weekend. And for the first time in my adult life, I was not going to fix their mess. Monday morning came like a storm. At 8:17 a.m., a rental SUV screeched into my driveway. Zephyra, Lyric, Fletcher, his wife, and my parents jumped out before the engine even stopped. They didn't knock. The front door flew open, and all 4 ran into my living room shouting over each other. "Where are my kids?" Lyric screamed first, her face red and her mascara already running. Zephyr pushed past her. "Kaylin, what did you do? CPS just called us in Vegas." Dad's voice boomed behind them. "You had no right to involve the state." Mom was crying and clutching her purse like a shield. There were grandbabies involved, and everyone was panicking. I stayed seated on the couch, hands folded, and let them shout and yell first. I had expected this scene, and I was ready. Before anyone could reach me, 2 county cars pulled up outside. Ms. Celine from Saturday stepped out with a sheriff's deputy and a process server. They walked in calmly and slowly, and their presence made everyone stop talking for a moment. The deputy announced, "You are served with emergency dependency papers and a temporary restraining order. This order says you cannot contact Kaylin Fletcher or try to access her money or accounts." The TTRO was granted at 7:45 this morning by Judge Alvarez. Lyric lunged forward. "You can't keep me from my children." The deputy stopped her calmly. "Step back. If you don't, you will be arrested immediately." That's when the second car opened across the street. Alaric and Isolde Bishop, Lyric's parents, came out. Isolde's face was stone serious, and Alaric carried a briefcase like he was going to a battle. Lyric ran to her mother, sobbing about evil aunts and stolen babies. She cried so loudly that I could almost hear her little heart breaking. Vesper appeared on my porch at the same time. Her heels clicked, and she had a folder in hand. She didn't shout. She said, "Everyone inside needs to leave the property now. The restraining order is active. Deputies will escort you off if necessary." Zephyra turned toward me, veins bulging, eyes wild. "This is insane. You're destroying our family over money." Dad tried the guilt tactic. "Kaylin, honey, we can fix this. Just say it was a misunderstanding." Mom just repeated, "Please, please," like a broken record. I finally stood. My voice was steady, colder than I thought. "No. You abandoned 2 children on my porch, committed mortgage fraud with my name, and thought a weekend in Vegas would make it all okay. The state is involved because you broke the law, not because I'm cruel. The restraining order is in place because I'm done being your emergency exit." Alaric spoke for the first time, low and clipped. "Lyric, get in the car. We came here to help get the grandchildren back, not to watch you make everything worse. Lyric stared at her father in disbelief. Isolde put an arm around her daughter and guided her toward their rental without another word. The deputy handed each adult their copies of the papers. Within 5 minutes, the driveway was empty except for Vesper and the smell of burnt rubber. She closed the door behind the last deputy and exhaled. That went exactly as planned. Shelter care hearing is in 40 minutes. Let's go. That same Monday afternoon, the confrontation continued on my front lawn. The shelter care hearing had ended, and temporary custody was given to the county. The judge ordered all adults to come to my house for a supervised safety check before anyone could leave town. 2 CPS workers, Ms. Celine and a new senior worker, Ms. Callista, stood on my porch with clipboards, while a deputy watched from the sidewalk. Everyone else was allowed back on the property for only 30 minutes. I opened my laptop and turned it so everyone could see the screen. The first slide was Ring camera footage from Friday, showing the kids arriving on my porch and the chaos that had happened. The second was county property records showing my name on the house, proving I owned it. The third was the loan papers with a forged notary page, showing the adults had faked my signature. The fourth was the bank's foreclosure judgment, showing the house was in danger. I clicked play on the last file. A spreadsheet I made that morning, showing every withdrawal from the equity line going to casino markers in Las Vegas, many signed by Lyric. Silence fell. You could hear the refrigerator hum. Zephyr's face went white. Dad stared at the floor. Mom covered her mouth with both hands. But Alaric and Isolde Bishop reacted the hardest. Isolde actually gasped and grabbed the couch arm to steady herself. Alaric's jaw was so tight, I thought it might break a tooth. Lyric tried to speak first. Those withdrawals were for the kids for daycare. Alaric cut her off without raising his voice. Stop. We paid those daycare bills ourselves every month. Don't lie to me, Lyric. Zephyr exploded. He took 2 steps toward me, fists clenched, eyes wild. You're destroying our whole family. All this over a stupid loan. I didn't flinch. It's a crime when my signature was never on it. That's felony fraud, Zephyra. And you knew it. Lyric dropped to her knees on my living room rug, tears streaming. How can you be so heartless? They're just little kids. Kaelin, Caius keeps asking for his mommy. The words hit hard, but I was prepared. Isolde turned to her daughter, voice trembling but firm. We came thinking we could help you fight for custody. But if you've been gambling away the house the babies were supposed to grow up in... She couldn't finish. Alaric finished it for her. Then we have no choice but to testify against our own daughter. The children come first. Lyric always. Lyric let out a sound I hope I never hear again. Half scream, half sob, and collapsed against her mother. Isolde didn't push her away, but didn't comfort her either. She just stared at the evidence on the screen, like she was seeing her child for the first time. Dad tried the old tactic. Kaelin, baby. We'll pay it all back. Just give us time. I shook my head slowly. You've had 6 years. The bank sale is in 59 days. I'm not waiting anymore. Ms. Callista cleared her throat. This meeting is over. All adults will get a written notice of the next hearing. No contact with Ms. Fletcher until the restraining order is reviewed. One by one they left. Zephyra was last, glancing at me with pure hatred. Lyric had to be half-carried to the car by her parents. Mom was still crying. Dad looked 20 years older than an hour ago. The door closed. The house was quiet again. Vesper put a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding since Friday. Yeah. For the first time in years, I actually am. 10 weeks later, the consequences finally hit all at once. I was on a conference call when my phone lit up with a local news alert. Cuyahoga County Sheriff's sale, 1427, East 125th Street. The house sold for $58,000 below what was owed. The bank padlocked the house that same afternoon. By evening, Dad texted a single photo of adults and a mountain of boxes crammed into 2 motel rooms off I-90. No caption was needed. 3 days later, Vesper forwarded me the divorce filing. Zephyra Fletcher versus Lyric Fletcher. Irreconcilable differences filed in domestic relations court. The kids were finally safe, the adults had to face the law, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe without worry. It wasn't easy, and my heart still ached for Caius and Alara. But I knew I had done the right thing, even when it hurt. I sat down with Vesper and we talked about how the kids were doing in foster care, what their favorite snacks were, and how to make sure their stuffed animals and routines stayed the same. We even wrote a little note for the foster parents, so the children would feel loved and safe, even though everything else was confusing. The house was quiet now, but this quiet felt different. It felt like peace, the kind you get after a storm has passed. I looked at the empty driveway and remembered the little voices of Caius and Alara, and I smiled softly, knowing that they were safe and cared for. Even though the grown-ups had made mistakes, and even though the bank took the house, I felt a small kind of victory. Because for once the children came first, and that was the most important thing in the world. This is the story of how a family's mistakes caused chaos, but how staying calm, following the law, and making hard decisions could protect the kids and make sure they had a safe future. Caius and Alara didn't understand everything yet, but they would grow up safe, loved, and with people who cared for them. Even though the adults fought, yelled, and tried to fix things in the wrong way, the children were finally safe. And that mattered more than anything else. The part about who would take care of the kids was left blank, because neither of their parents had passed the important home check the court required. The report from the caseworker was very harsh. The kids' home wasn't stable. Their parents owed over $200,000 because of gambling. Both parents had tested positive for cocaine in the drug tests that the court required. It was clear that they were not ready to take care of the kids. Their parental rights weren't taken away yet, but the court stopped trying to help them get the children back. While Zephyrah and Lyric were busy blaming each other for everything that went wrong, Alaric and Isolde Bishop quietly did what needed to be done. They didn't complain, they didn't argue, and they didn't waste any time. They hired the best child welfare lawyer in Tampa to make sure everything was done correctly. They flew back to Cleveland every other week to check on the kids. They completed every class the county asked for, no matter how long or boring. They even turned the spare bedroom in their retirement condo into a perfect nursery, with soft blue paint on the walls, little toys on the shelves, and tiny clothes folded neatly in the drawers. Every detail showed they cared. They passed the home check from another state with flying colors. The kids had been living with Alaric and Isolde since week 6 in a temporary placement with relatives. Nobody argued about it because everyone could see how much the kids were loved and how happy they were. Caius and Alara were already starting to feel at home there. They had a room that was theirs, a safe bed, and people who would never gamble away their home. The final court hearing was scheduled for the Friday before Labor Day. I drove downtown alone, parked in the Justice Center garage, and took the elevator up to the 15th floor. The courtroom was almost empty. Only the kids' guardian, Adam, the assistant prosecutor, Vesper, the bishops, and I were there. Zephyrah and Lyric were there too, sitting on opposite sides of the room, looking exhausted. It was clear they hadn't slept in weeks. The magistrate didn't waste any time. She looked over the file for maybe 5 minutes, then looked up at everyone in the room. She said that, based on all the evidence, the parents had not fixed the problems that had caused the kids to be removed from their care. She explained that the grandparents, Alaric and Isolde, had shown they were stable, sober, and completely committed to doing what was best for the kids. She officially gave permanent custody to Alaric and Isolde Bishop immediately. Lyric made a sound like someone had punched her in the stomach. Zephyrah just stared straight ahead, not saying a word. No one appealed the decision. After court, the bishops asked if they could speak to me in the hallway. Isolde's eyes were red from crying, but she looked steady. She said, "We want you to know the kids are happy. Caius started pre-kindergarten last week, and Alara is learning new words every day. They ask about Aunt Kaylin sometimes. We would like you to stay in their lives however you feel comfortable." Alaric added quietly, "You did the hardest thing anyone could do. You saved them when no one else would. We will never forget that." I nodded, my throat tight. I said, "Send me pictures. I'll send birthday presents." That was enough for now. We exchanged hugs that felt a little awkward, but also necessary. Then they walked away, holding hands, officially parents again at 68 and 66 years old. Driving home, I passed by the old house. A bright orange foreclosure sticker was still on the front door. The lawn was already overgrown. The house looked smaller than I remembered, like the life that used to be inside it had disappeared. It felt strange, like the old house had lost all its warmth, all its memories, and all its laughter. That night, I poured a glass of wine, sat on my porch, and let myself feel everything I had been holding back for 10 straight weeks. I felt relief that the kids were safe. I felt sadness for the family that no longer existed. And I felt something that was almost like peace, even though it was mixed with grief. The fallout wasn't pretty. Dad and Mom were sleeping in separate motel rooms that were paid for by church vouchers. Zephyrah had taken a warehouse job, and was living in a tiny studio apartment that smelled like instant noodles and regret. Lyric had moved back to Florida with nothing but the clothes she wore to court. But Caius and Alara were safe. They were asleep in bunk beds painted pale blue in a home that would never be lost because of gambling or chaos. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't the emergency fund, the cosigner, or the cleanup crew. I was just me. That felt amazing. That was finally enough. 10 months later, everything was finally settled. The civil fraud case against my parents and the bank ended quietly in federal court on a Thursday morning. The judge said the Helilock, a home loan, was void because my signature had never been on any of the papers. $350,000 of debt disappeared from my credit report overnight. I kept only the original $30,000 I had knowingly co-signed 6 years earlier and set up a simple payment plan that would be done in 3 years. When the clerk handed me the certified order, I felt the last chain fall off my shoulders. I also made another decision that week. I blocked every number, email, and social media account connected to Dad, Mom, Zephra, and Lyric. No angry voicemails, no tearful apologies, no promises of "we'll pay you back someday." I changed my mailing address to a private box and installed a new security camera that ignored anything from unknown faces. Complete silence. The only connection I kept was with Alaric and Isolde Bishop. Every birthday and Christmas, I send a package to their door in Tampa, addressed to Caius and Alara. I put in books, Lego sets, dresses with matching hair bows, or whatever they were interested in that year. Isolde sends photos back. Caius missing his 2 front teeth holding a new bike, Alara asleep on a unicorn blanket I picked out. Those pictures live in a folder on my phone labeled Family Safe. Nothing else. Dad ended up in a small senior housing studio with a voucher he barely qualified for. Mom took a night job cleaning offices downtown and sometimes had to sleep in her car when the shelter was full. Zephyr's warehouse paycheck goes straight to child support he will never catch up on. Lyric moved into a halfway house after a 30-day rehab program that nobody asked her to finish. None of them have a stable address long enough for me to send them mail, even if I wanted to. Meanwhile, I got promoted to Director of Forensic Investigations, bought new furniture that nobody else picked out, and started taking pottery classes on Tuesday nights just because I could. My house is quiet, just mine. My credit score is the highest it has ever been, and my emergency fund is growing instead of disappearing. The biggest lesson I learned isn't about laws or money. It's simpler and harsher. Never turn yourself into someone else's ATM. If you do, they stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as money. They can take from you whenever they want. One day, the account runs out, and they will blame you for not having more. I learned the hard way that protecting children sometimes means protecting yourself first, because nobody else will. Caius and Alara will grow up calling Alaric and Isolde Dad and Mom. They will never remember the motel nights, the courtroom, or the aunt who disappeared from their daily life. And that is exactly how it should be. They are safe, loved, and free from the chaos that came before. That is the only victory that matters. Caius and Alara are happy. They are learning, laughing, and growing up in a home full of love. They don't know about the struggles that came before. They just know that they are safe. And knowing that, I finally feel at peace too. I finally know that what matters most is not the chaos or the money or the arguments, but keeping the kids safe and loved. And for that, everything I went through was worth it.